It's really critical to be curious. Curiosity is so important. Don't take things at face value, because that really helps you to dig deeper into the why, which is really a critical step as an analyst. Anyone can get to the what. You really need to dig into the why, and curiosity can help you get to that.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Earn. Today I've got Larissa Jensen on the show. Welcome, Larissa.
Thank you for having me, Conor.
The minds and marketing strategies.
And Larissa's a rock star. For those that don't know,
businesses.
she's the senior vice president on the beauty side at Circana.
By CreatorIQ.
And then prior to that, so for those that don't know Circana was MVD plus IRI put together. And they have all the sales data, all the research data. So they know more about the industry than the industry knows about itself, which is exciting. So your background and your history is something that I think most people, it's just not super common, right? So you've been in the industry for over, 20 years, right? The thing that I find most interesting is you've been an analyst in the industry for a really long time. And I think in general, industries tend to go through kind of waves, up and down and up and down. I'm curious, what wave is the beauty industry in today? And how have you seen those, what do the waves look like to you over time?
When I came to NPD close to 20 years ago, prestige brands were just department stores. That was it. That was really the universe, right? Technology, like how it exists today, didn't really exist back then. Like, we didn't have social media. We didn't have smartphones. You wanted to communicate with someone, it was like a letter, like in the mailbox, like crazy. Clearly, the industry has changed a lot, right, in that time. If you think back to the way it was, because of the fact that there was no technology, and I think technology changed the industry in such a pivotal way by giving the consumer a voice. And before that, it was really the brands. They are the ones who dominated. They're the ones who indicated what was considered beautiful, right? When you think about the industry at its core, it didn't change. What's changed, Conor, is how that's happened, right? I mean, I saw a recent ad for Maybelline from 1925. But what was the ad saying? It was really about how women could be more beautiful, giving them confidence, right? So really, beauty has always been about that. And so that hasn't changed. But really, I think the differences lie in what makes us more confident. So back then, it used to be about looking like a specific ideal. Again, the brands were dictating, this is what's beautiful, right? Having your hair this way, wearing this certain lip color, or whatever it may be. And today, it's more about being the best version of yourself, right? It's sort of like beauty is defined by what you want it to be. And I think that's kind of the most exciting thing. And I will make one mention, though, because, again, having been in the industry so long, one thing I have been seeing, which kind of makes me pause a little bit, is, we've done research looking at a trend that we're calling prejuvenation, which is the idea of using non-surgical procedures to kind of enhance how you look. So think Botox fillers, things like that, right? The consumers that are actually doing this the most are younger. The ones that have done it or intend to try it skew much younger, millennials and Gen Z. That concerns me a little. Are we going back to those days of where we're trying to reach an ideal? Because, if you're tweaking this or that, everyone wants to have their lips fuller, their nose smaller, whatever it may be. Do you all starting to look alike to this ideal again, right? So it's ebb and flow.
So I'm curious, what made you decide to start leaning in and paying attention to social back in 2014 when it wasn't, what it is today?
Right. I don't think there was ever a question that social media is going to change the world. And I think we recognized early on that you and Tribe Dynamics at the time were capturing something truly unique. It was very different. It was really fresh. And correlating our data with your data was really the perfect way to help explain what was peripherally happening behind certain brand successes, right? Because clearly social media was starting to make an impact. if you think about it, like what makes a brand successful? Having excellent products that work, that is, right? That's number one. All products being equally good, what's the difference? Right? And I think social media share of voice, we recognize that was it in a big way. So it was like Instagram was, really big. And what was big on Instagram was makeup. It was hair products, makeup. We saw sales surging, and that was really helping to explain part of what was happening there. But then it moved on to TikTok. TikTok saw the surge. We were like, oh, skincare can never really do well on social media because it's not visual like the way makeup or hair is. Here's a before and after. But it goes to show you how things evolve, right? My point being is that, the categories behave differently on the different platforms, right? So I was like, okay, skincare will never really take off on social media. And there you go. I mean, proven wrong once again when it comes to technology. But I'm curious, what's next? Like, what's going to come after TikTok? What is the new platform? Do you know that?
Honestly, I think about this a lot. And I think, one, it's really hard to predict. Let's start there. I think, two, one of the things that people underestimate is like, it doesn't actually happen that often, right? So like, if you were to look at the last 10 years, there's only one platform that's emerged in the last 10 years, right? Instagram's over 10 years old. Facebook's over 10 years old. Snapchat's over 10 years old. LinkedIn. And TikTok was 2016, which is now almost 10 years ago, right? And there hasn't really been anything of note since then. There's been a bunch of people that have tried. Like Clubhouse got a little bit of traction and then fell off.
You're going to get a lot of that. But I think you're right, Conor. And I'm glad you brought up the 10 years because that's exactly how we've been seeing it too.
What made TikTok special was it did short videos to music, right? Like that was its innovation. And so you have to do something new, right? It's going to be a new content format. The other thing that happens too is people kind of capture generations, right? So it's like there'll be a generation, like 6 to 8 years or 10 years of people. My generation is Instagram. The next generation after that is Snapchat. And then it's really kind of TikTok. Now we all use TikTok now, but like your friend network all goes to one place. And so you go there. And so the question is, what is like Gen Alpha or whatever's after that, Gen Beta, I don't know. What are they going to hop onto?
I think you make an excellent point that it's where your friend network is. You end up kind of keep gravitating to that because of it.
Totally. So maybe take a step back. For those that don't know kind of what Circana does, because I have a few questions specifically about that, but I want them to know what you do. Sure. Describe that for people that aren't working with you guys day to day.
Okay, so Circana is a market research company. You explained it very eloquently in the beginning. It was NPD, which tracks general merchandise, and IRI, which tracks more CPG market, merged together. So as Circana, rebranded, right, track over $3.2 trillion of U.S. retail spend. Basically, anything that you can buy from your local supermarket or 7-Eleven to, Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, and everything kind of in between. So we're tracking general merchandise industries like beauty is one of them, but apparel, technology, toys, home goods. But then also on the CPG side, we're able to see how beauty plays out there as well. But then also you can look at food and just consumer goods like dog food and paper towels and basically everything.
Totally.
Everything.
Totally,
you want to know, like you said, we know everything there is to know, probably more than the industry itself, and just multiply that by multiple industries. So it's been an incredible journey to be part of something so big after being so focused for so long.
It's got to be fun to watch it grow into what it has. And I think for me, where I see you guys providing a ton of value is, if I'm a brand, let's say I'm Glow Recipe, right? Or Estee Lauder or LVMH or whatever, I don't know what everybody else is doing. I have no visibility into how different categories are changing, how different brands are succeeding or losing, how different retailers are doing, et cetera. And so you guys being able to provide those insights is a huge value to the industry. So
I'm probably going to skip ahead, but I know one of the things that you wanted to talk about was how brands, I guess, are connecting social media to revenue. That is the gold, right? Is you kind of know how you're doing, but how are you doing in relation to everything else? So everyone knows their data, right? So if your product goes viral, you're going to see your sales go up, right? And that's to be expected. And we see it in our data time and again, right? There's like no question. There's a direct cause and effect in terms of connecting social virality. Is that a word? How does your brand success compare to others, right? So yeah, you may have seen a spike, but was it as high as it could have been, right? Does your competitor experience steeper sales gains? Are you missing an opportunity? Because that's like really where the magic happens because, as you know, context is everything. You may be growing 18%, but if the market's growing 20, you're losing share. And having that broader view that Circana brings now across all these different industries, including CPG, again, brings context, which I think is so critical. When I was just reporting on prestige beauty, okay, yeah, it's great. We're growing double digits. It's fantastic. Now, when we started to look at across industries, I started to bring in some of the performance of these other industries to show beauty how we're performing in the context of everything else. Because, yeah, okay, it's great. But did you know that everything else, literally every other industry, is declining in units? Like, we're in a difficult macroeconomic environment, and beauty's like, we're doing great. It's almost, you're almost like in an insulated bubble, and it's important to recognize what's happening around you.
I'm curious on that idea. You talked a little bit about kind of connecting social media to sales and such. Have you seen brands and retailers become much more sophisticated in understanding that kind of relationship than when you first started?
Well, I think honestly, it varies. But at this point, I think every client, every beauty brand out there has to have a social media strategy, right? It's like, it really is cost of entry. It's an integral part of the new marketing plan. I mean, back when I was doing marketing, we didn't have that. But really, in many ways, social and influencers, it's just an evolution of the most basic advertising concepts, which is reach. Really at its core, right? But as you know, it's more than just reach. It's reaching the right audience with the right influencer, right? One thing I would say is that when we go out to consumers, we've asked them, like, are you following influencers like in your age or, different ages? And I think that the majority of influencers on the market tend to be on the younger side. Like, as an industry, it's important to have representation. We know this. It's all about inclusivity, right? I don't feel we have enough representation. This is my own personal, soapbox. I'm going to stand up on it now. For the older consumer, you want to be able to see yourself reflected in that, right? So is it that there's not enough older influencers? And I'm not necessarily talking 67 years old, although God bless them. If you want to be an influencer at that age, go for it, right? But as women age, it just makes sense. And you have a significant portion of the population and beauty consumer that is older than, millennial and Gen X. And now all anyone's talking about is Gen Alpha. Yes, everyone keeps focusing as an industry. We keep focusing young. But I think that there is a miss potentially in the influencer community and brands having that ability to connect with consumers in that authentic way.
I 100% agree. We had Rosemary from RMS Beauty on the podcast with her co-founder, and she's become kind of a face of her generation, and some of it just kind of by accident. One of the things they did, they shot a video of her. They're like, we want you to do a video of you putting on your makeup. She's like, okay. And so she did it, and she didn't really know. This was early TikTok days. And then they put it out there, and she started with no makeup on, right? Which is not something you would typically do.
Yes.
And she was mortified that they put it on TikTok, but it went insanely viral, right?
Yes.
Because it connected with other women of that age that, they couldn't keep the product in stock. They sold out like crazy.
Okay.
And they want to hear from people that have the same issues as them, right? They're going through the same life events. And I know one of the things that we've seen in our data is there's two things, right? So one is we've seen a huge surge in skincare in 2023, just massive surge relative to the other categories. I'd be curious if you're seeing that in your data. And then the second thing I tend to see is the brands that do well in our data, which is social data, right? Influencer data. They also tend to do really well in specialty retail. My thesis is if you're following a makeup artist or a hairstylist online, you're not usually shopping at, the less sophisticated retailers, right? The ones that just have a few brands. Like you want to go and have the full catalog, so to speak. So I'm curious, are you seeing a similar kind of surge in skincare? And then do you see it disproportionately affect specialty versus non-specialty?
I think you kind of hinted at it as you were asking the question. It really boils down to brand assortment. As a retailer, if you have a brand that consumers want, they're going to come to you to buy it. That's like the most plain and simple way to explain it, right? Consumers are going to shop wherever a brand is sold, which I think ties into, other bigger picture things. But at the end of the day, I think what's really interesting and why, I think specialty is doing so well. Yes, there is a lot more brand options there, but honestly, if another retailer that's not specialty carries a brand that consumers want, they're going to go there, right? But I think it's really about like how the days of brands being defined by where they're sold is over. So it's become harder to associate your brand as like, oh, I'm a prestige brand or I'm a mass brand based on solely on your distribution. Those walls have come down. It's on the brand really to build its image, and that image is going to hold true no matter where you're sold. And I always bring this up. And I know for some people that they're very familiar with this, but Chanel is sold in Shoppers Drug Mart in Canada. Shoppers Drug Mart is a drugstore, but no one thinks any less of Chanel as Chanel, right? Which I think is a very interesting dynamic playing out in the industry. But then you bring up the skincare piece. And I love this question because it's so interesting to me that you're seeing that, because we've been talking about the fact that we're entering into what I've been calling the season of skincare. Now, from an industry perspective, I speak a lot at industry events, and I have, for the past, I want to say like year or so, I've been testing the pulse of the industry in terms of what category do they think is performing the best, right? Since I've been back on the road after COVID and everything, everyone votes skincare. It's really funny. And that was during a period when makeup was actually the strongest performer, not skincare. And from the industry perspective, it's because we're seeing so much activity in it, right? There's a lot of new brands coming into the market. When we look at the number of new brands coming into the different categories in beauty, skincare blows it away. That's almost like where a lot of new brands are kind of entering into the beauty industry is through skincare. So we've seen that kind of playing out. That said, that also means competition is going to be so much harder if history repeated itself. Skincare would be kind of taking over in 2025. But it seems like this cycle has accelerated. And this is what I mean. When we look at monthly sales of last year, 23, right? If you're looking from January to December and you're looking at makeup and skincare, both of them are growing double digits. So that's great. But what's so interesting is that at the middle of the year, we started to see skincare start to grow faster. And it maintained that kind of faster pace for the last, I want to say maybe 5 of the last 7 months of the year. So overall, makeup still was the fastest grower last year, so it stuck with that cycle. But because we started to see this shift happening within the year, I'm like, I think skincare is going to really take off, and it's going to start early. And so we began to change our forecast to have skincare be stronger. And that's really kind of what's happening right now. Skincare is just performing better in mass and in prestige. And so based again on history, we could be looking at another 3 or so years of skincare having stronger growth, which is not to say makeup will be declining, but just that skincare is going to be stronger. So I just find that so interesting how it's aligned with what we're seeing in our data.
We've generally, or the way that I think about it, is there's this kind of time lag between buzz and then revenue, right? Like I've heard about the Sphere in Las Vegas 47 times in the last 6 months. I haven't gone and spent money there, right? I'll probably do it if I go to, go to Las Vegas.
Of course.
And so I think the same thing tends to happen. So like for us in our data, makeup was killing it in 2022, right? So 2022, it's buzzing, it's going like crazy. So then, you start to see the sales in 2023, and now we're seeing it. And again, to your point, makeup's not doing bad now, right? Like makeup's still growing about 15%. It's just skincare is growing 80% in our data. And that's compared to, let's say, apparel, which is actually negative, right?
It's usually the number one industry where consumers are spending in. It's just because it's so massive, I think it's just hard to just grow like a huge ship.
Yeah, totally. I also think people like, at least if I'm reflecting on my own behavior, it's like you were kind of cooped up during the pandemic. Then the pandemic gets over. Everybody's like, new outfits, new closets, new wardrobes. Cyclically, you slow down a little bit after you've filled up your closet.
Yeah.
So what other patterns or trends are you talking about these days? Like, what are you seeing in the market? Also, I'm curious, like, what people are asking you about, because I think that's also kind of a leading question too. Like, when everybody's asking you about the same thing, you know, something's going on there. What are you seeing in the data? What are you talking about?
I think the biggest things that we're talking about right now are a consumer shift to value, which is really interesting because, you know, now having this broader view, it doesn't necessarily mean that consumers are going from prestige to mass. That's not what it means when you think value. Oh, I'm just going to get the less expensive item. It really is finding value in different ways, because when we look at the unit performance, which again, to me, I think unit performance speaks a lot more to demand, because you can see dollars are growing, but if it's being driven by average price and units are actually down, that's not really saying a lot about the demand for the industry, right? So I like to look at it from a unit perspective. And when we're looking at what's happening right now, and even what was happening in 23, what we started to see playing out in 23, prestige beauty, looking at just the beauty industry, was growing units 10 times faster than the mass market. It's not like consumers are saying, well, I'm going to find value by paying less. So that wasn't necessarily the case. Now, within prestige, the value of what consumers are looking for is, I like to look at fragrance as like the canary in the coal mine. During the pandemic, when everything declined, everything was like down like crazy, 60, 70%, because stores were shut down. So we're watching throughout the year, the categories start to get a little better as stores opened up. And fragrance, I'll never forget, it was like a 30-point jump in performance. And then it just kept going up, and to the point where at the very end of the year, it was in the positive. And I'm like, that's a spectacular recovery. Like the other categories were chugging along, growing, but like fragrance was like this. And what was really driving that was consumers turning to fragrance for themselves, because we still weren't necessarily going out. It was the emotional connection. It was mental wellness, all of those things tied together. But the other categories kind of flowed behind that surge we saw in fragrance. And so consumers were investing in themselves. They were buying the really expensive fragrance, not the $90, $100 fragrance. They were buying the $300, $400, $500 fragrance, right? So think about what was going viral during that time, right? So you've got all these momentum behind fragrance. What we're starting to see happening with fragrance now is now the consumers are shifting away from those really high end. So think about, like you were talking about what you were doing in apparel. So it's the same kind of idea. If you're buying all these luxury fragrances, like how many more can you buy? That's not necessarily what's behind all of this, but that's part of it, right? Potentially. But what we're starting to see now is growing are things like minis, so smaller sizes, gift sets, and body sprays. All of them say value in some way. Minis, obviously, smaller size, less price. Gift sets, the value in having multiple items for a set, from really marginally over the price of the juice. And then body sprays within prestige, $25 is the average price for that. And we've seen a huge surge in that. And as a result of it, we're seeing kind of a similar type of dynamic playing out across other industries a little bit. Like if you look at makeup, designer brands are doing well. You might say to me, how is that value? Because they're much more expensive than regular. If you think about makeup in the picture of categories, it's the lowest priced category. So if you're going to trading up in the lowest price category is really...
You're not buying the Chanel bag.
Yeah, exactly. Lipstick is not a big purchase per se, but you can have a little piece of luxury in your lipstick. So that in a way can be value, right? But the other thing we're talking about too is this consumer, it's like a greater shift to expertise. So if you think about like derm brands have been so hot, everyone's been talking about derm brands. I mean, it really does speak to, at its core, to consumer need for expertise in their brands. Derm brands are recommended by dermatologists, so that gives you confidence. When you look at the makeup category, the brands that are growing the fastest and represent the most are makeup artist brands. Again, there's the expertise. You look at hair, the brands that are representing the biggest volume and growing the most, salon brands. They have their heritage in the hair salon. Again, that expertise. So we're seeing more and more of that, I think. So it's going to become more important for brands to really drive home their expertise to consumers in whatever category that they're in. I think that most of the typical questions you would expect, right? Like wanting to understand white space opportunities, how to maximize sales outside of promotion, because obviously, you don't want to give away too much of your product when you may not have to, right? Growing consumer bases, growing distribution, things like that. And all of those things are different for everyone. But I have to tell you, in all my presentations that I've done this year, because kind of like you have like your road show and you go out and you like talk to people, the biggest buzz that I get every time I present it is around Gen Alpha. Like it literally kind of stops the conversation and we have to now digress and talk about what's happening there. So I think that probably is one of the biggest things, because I think brands and retailers want to understand, what does it mean for me? And can I capitalize on it? It's an interesting trend taking place because these are younger consumers. We went out like after the holidays, which we know like obviously skincare and Gen Alpha and the whole thing. Fun fact, skincare grew faster than fragrance on the prestige side. And it grew twice as fast as makeup on the mass side. So skincare was just reigning supreme in Q4, and a lot of it was being driven by this younger consumer base. We asked consumers, if you have Gen Alpha in your house, if you have a child under 13, did they ask for a beauty gift for the holidays? 50% said yes. Now, here's what's funny. I said the same thing. I'm like, wow, it's so interesting. Then my son, who is not in market research at all, he's in college. And I was telling him this, he's like, well, Mom, that doesn't make any sense. Like, because did you ask if they have boys or girls? Because I think if it was like girls, it might have been even higher. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess. Speaking of the holiday season and Gen Alpha, there's an advisor or an analyst at Circana for all the different industries. So there's someone who does my job for technology, for apparel. There's a bunch of us. And we meet every month and we talk about what's happening in our industries. And I'll never forget last year, I want to say it was like October, November, the analyst for toys, she's like, it's so weird. There's just no hot toy for girls this holiday. I'm like, the hot toy is prestige skincare. And she's like, what do you mean? And so I was like, started sending her TikTok videos. And she's like, wow, like, because they're not necessarily looking. Again, like, this is why it's so good to have this context across different industries, because they're not necessarily looking for that. But yeah, it was kind of funny. So Gen Alpha does bring a lot of conversation.
Let's wrap it up with that question. So yeah. I was counting while we were sitting here, and I think you've gotten close to, a dozen promotions yourself over the course of your career, if not more. You've got a lot. Okay. You've moved up the chain. And I'm curious, for others that want to follow kind of a similar path to what you've followed, what would be your advice to them?
Thank you for this question, because I think it is so important. And one of my favorite things in what I do every day is mentor. Like, I just love to mentor and just, share some of that experience to help others kind of navigate their own, right? So it's really critical to be curious. Curiosity is so important. Don't take things at face value, because that really helps you to dig deeper into the why, which is really a critical step as an analyst. Anyone can get to the what. You really need to dig into the why, and curiosity can help you get to that. So what do you do with it, right? Another really important piece in terms of like a role very specific to analyzing data and communicating it out is being good at communications. How to communicate your message, right? Which really means, ironically, to listen. To be a really good communicator, you need to listen and embrace clarity, because you should always be looking for a way to simplify your message. You're going to make a bigger impact that way. But I think more broadly, the advice that I always give to, mentees is to have patience. That's so hard to do. To have patience in the career path. I always say, don't look left or right, because what is it? Comparison is the thief of joy, right? It's just, you don't want to do that. Focus on your own journey. Don't look at what this person's doing or what that person's. Always try and be better than what you were yesterday. And I think positive attitude, that has helped me a lot. I read somewhere that a great attitude becomes a great mood, which becomes a great day, which becomes a great year, which becomes a great life, right? And I know it's not always easy. And I feel like you follow this because you're always so smiley. But at the end of the day, though, we all have our dark moments. We're all human. But it's about remembering that it's a choice, right? You could either wallow in the sorrow or find and embrace the joy. Hard work, I think that goes without saying, but it's worth mentioning. You put in the hours, you learn everything you can. And the last thing I would say is believe in yourself and your abilities. If you're struggling, you might be a fish in a tree, meaning that you're not in the right place where your skill sets can thrive, right? Let me tell you, I have been a fish in a tree before. It is not fun. Every bad experience could be a learning opportunity, and that's how you have to kind of twist it. And most important, advocate for yourself because no one else will.
I love that. I've never heard that analogy before.
Yeah, that's my personal favorite.
That one's going to be one that sticks with me. Like, I'm definitely going to use that one. It's hard to be patient. It's hard to look at other people and oh, but look at what they're doing. And, I'm now, 16 years into my career too. So I got a lot of gray hair to show for it. I've now gotten to see those cycles, right? Because then you see people that, they rise up and then maybe they don't keep going, right? They fall off. And so I think just focusing on yourself is definitely the ideal. Hard to do. I mean, those are awesome recommendations. Those are all exactly on point. I think I'm obsessed with them.
This is my favorite thing. And those are the things that are consistently that I bring up. And by the way, fun fact, and I might get a lot of hate for this, but you talked about gray hair. This is like my natural hair. I haven't had to dye for grays yet. I'm over 50. Let's just put it that way. I'm just going to say I'm over 50. So I'm just going on that hump there. Maybe it's a positive attitude. It's good genes, whatever it may be. I am going with it. I know at some point it's going to happen, but I got this far.
The thing I'm clinging on to, I can't cling on to the gray hair thing anymore. It's happening, but I am clinging on to I have my hair. So that I feel very good about. What makes me happy. Anyways, well, I really appreciate you taking out the time, Larissa. That was awesome. So glad that we got to become friends through this process and excited to see what you and Circana continue to do.
Thank you.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by CreatorIQ. CreatorIQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at CreatorIQ.com.